April 17, 1961. Before sunrise, hundreds of armed Cuban exiles quietly landed on the southern coast of Cuba. They believed they were about to ignite a nationwide uprising that would overthrow Fidel Castro's government within days. Instead, they stepped into a disaster that would become one of the CIA's most famous failures, and a defining moment of the Cold War. This is the story of the Bay of Pigs invasion, Fidel Castro's rise. To understand why the invasion happened, we need to go back to 1959. That year, Fidel Castro and his revolutionary movement overthrew the government of Fulgencio Batista. Many Cubans welcomed the revolution, hoping for political reform and an end to corruption. But as Castro strengthened his control, his government nationalized industries, limited political opposition, and built closer ties with the Soviet Union. For the United States, this was a serious concern. Cuba was located only about 90 miles from Florida. During the Cold War, American leaders feared that a Soviet-aligned government so close to the U.S. mainland could threaten regional security. The CIA's secret plan, as relations between Washington and Havana worsened, the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, began planning a covert operation. The idea was to recruit Cuban exiles, people who had fled Castro's government, and train them to return to Cuba as an invasion force. The planners believed that once these fighters landed, the Cuban population would rise up against Castro, and parts of the military might switch sides. The mission appeared carefully designed on paper, but it depended on one critical assumption: that the people of Cuba were ready to revolt. Preparing for the invasion, hundreds of volunteers were secretly trained in camps outside Cuba. They learned military tactics, weapons handling, and amphibious landings. The invasion force became known as Brigade 2506. Meanwhile, CIA officials developed plans for airstrikes intended to weaken the Cuban Air Force before the landing. Every stage of the operation relied on speed, secrecy, and the hope that events inside Cuba would unfold exactly as expected. However, intelligence assessments were far from perfect. Castro's government had already strengthened its defenses and was closely monitoring signs of foreign intervention. The invasion begins. On April 17, 1961, Brigade 2506 landed at the Bay of Pigs, a remote area on Cuba's southern coast. From the very beginning, problems emerged. The landing force encountered stronger resistance than expected. Some planned air support was reduced, allowing Cuban aircraft to attack the invading forces. Communication became difficult. Supplies ran short, and the expected nationwide uprising never happened. Instead of joining the invasion, most Cubans remained loyal to the government or stayed out of the conflict altogether. Within hours, the operation was losing momentum. The mission collapses. Fidel Castro responded quickly. Cuban military units surrounded the invasion force, while aircraft targeted supply ships offshore. Cut off from reinforcements and facing overwhelming resistance, Brigade 2506 found itself trapped. After nearly 3 days of fighting, the invasion had failed. More than 100 members of the brigade were killed, and over 1,000 were captured. The operation that had been expected to remove Castro instead strengthened his position both inside Cuba and on the international stage. The aftermath. For the newly elected President John F. Kennedy, the failure was a major political setback. Although the invasion had been planned before he took office, he accepted public responsibility for its outcome. Inside the CIA, the operation triggered intense criticism. Analysts questioned the planning, the intelligence, and the assumption that the Cuban people would support the invasion. Meanwhile, Fidel Castro emerged stronger than before. The failed invasion pushed Cuba even closer to the Soviet Union, increasing Cold War tensions. Only a year later, those tensions would lead to the Cuban Missile Crisis, bringing the United States and the Soviet Union closer to nuclear conflict than ever before. Conclusion. Today, the Bay of Pigs invasion is remembered as one of the most significant intelligence failures of the 20th century. It demonstrated that even carefully planned covert operations can collapse when intelligence is incomplete and assumptions prove wrong. More than 60 years later, historians continue to study the invasion, not only because it failed, but because of how deeply it influenced Cold War history and Cuba relations. Some operations change history through victory. Others change history through failure. The Bay of Pigs did both. Call to action. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Story Nest for more true stories of Cold War secrets, CIA operations, espionage, and the hidden events that shaped our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.